And then I'm going to say good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Karen Brownlee, and I am the Adult Program Coordinator at the North Suburban YMCA. In that role, I bring a variety of programs to our community, including social networking opportunities, a caregiver support group, brain games, and the adult education series, which you are attending today. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Heart Healthy Nutrition, hosted by Anna Harris. Anna is a personal trainer at the North Suburban YMCA, and more importantly for this presentation, she is a certified precision nutrition coach. She coaches individuals and groups, helping people to live healthier. Anna also teaches a variety of classes at the Y, including exercise, and she's also involved in some other programs that we do. And she's been a presenter with the Adult Education Series for several years now. Today's program is being recorded and will be available on the North Suburban YMCA website as a podcast on the Adult Education Series page. However, I'm excited to tell you that that's going to change. Netta, you already know this, but for everyone else, you are among the first to learn that the Adult Education Series is changing its name to the YMCA Education Series, which will be called YES. Through YES, we will be bringing in more programming to serve not only adults, but people of every age. We'll be hosting a wider variety of educational opportunities, including social justice and equity programs, options for youth and young adults, intergenerational programs, and educational forums to provide more community connections and collaboration. All of these programs will continue to be free and open to the public. And as a 501c3 charity, we do rely on fundraising to help us serve the community. If you enjoyed today's presentation and want to help us continue to offer free programs like this, we welcome your donations to the North Suburban YMCA. You can visit our website at nsymca.org to donate and see all that we are doing and planning to do. Anna's program will last about an hour, and she will take questions at the end of her presentation. And again, if you aren't already muted, or if you came on before I was able to mute you, if you could mute yourself, it would be appreciated, and you can unmute when she opens the forum for questions. Again, thank you for joining us today, and a special thank you to Anna for your time and for your effort in putting together today's presentation. And now I will let Anna teach you about heart healthy nutrition.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Karen. I would like to start by talking about why we're talking about nutrition in relation to heart health. And my number one reason is because I always see people trying to find some kind of magic pill, quick solution, quick fix, but we don't realize that sometimes it's right under your nose or literally on your plate in your nutrition. So nutrition can be a really, really powerful tool. And you will see that a lot of doctors, when you visit the doctors for your physical, they will bring up nutrition because that's becoming more and more important as the first line of defense in preventive medicine. So the reason we talk about nutrition is also because it's not about just the number of years you live, but it's how you live them. If you can travel, if you can play with your kids and grandkids, if you can generally enjoy your life, that lifespan, that's what's really important, that health span. So today we're going to talk, first of all, about overall factors that contribute to cardiovascular disease. And so you will, if you ever see me abbreviating it, CVD, what I mean is typically cardiovascular disease. We can talk about how you can prevent or slow the progression of cardiovascular disease. We will talk about nutrients and specifically phytonutrients that help you fight against that inflammation in the body, and then some little extras that contribute to heart health beyond your nutrition. So let's talk about the factors. First of all, cholesterol. So we know that high cholesterol contributes to cardiovascular disease, but cholesterol is not something we necessarily eat. Yes, some of it is we consume from food, but most of the cholesterol is naturally made in your liver. So it's important for a lot of functions in the body. We need the cholesterol. Cholesterol helps us build cells. It helps us make hormones. It helps bile production in the liver. It produces vitamin D. And we know, the two types, LDL and HDL. LDL is bad, and it can clog, too much LDL can clog the arteries. and those numbers can increase as we age. Triglycerides is something that puts you at extreme risk of heart disease because those triglycerides are stored in fat cells throughout the body. So if you lower those triglycerides, that helps you reduce the heart risk. If you already have high cholesterol, the American Heart Association recommends keeping saturated fats to just 5 to 6% of your daily calories. And saturated fats are the primary way of building cholesterol in the body. So yes, we need some of it, but too much of it can clog the arteries. If you can look at this image, you know, if there are more of those little cholesterol cells, then they start blocking the pathway, and then that can clog the arteries, and that is not good. That blockage is not good. So reasons for high cholesterol. I mentioned the saturated fat. So saturated fat consumption is really the number one reason. Your limit typically is 10%, but as I mentioned, for people with already high cholesterol, you want to try and keep it at 5 to 6%. There are also genetic reasons. Sometimes we're born with predisposition to high cholesterol, and that is something you can manage with the diet or talk to your doctor. Aside from genetics, saturated fat consumption is a major contributor. And a lot of the time it's the reason is that you're not consuming enough plants. There are not enough plants in their diet, which means not enough fiber. And fiber helps with the bile production, and that helps reduce the cholesterol. So we hear about atherosclerosis later in life, but it can actually start in childhood. So the sooner you reduce LDL, the better. And the numbers, cholesterol numbers, I don't know if you're familiar, but typically 160 to 190 is the time where you need to start making some lifestyle changes, specifically nutrition. Over 190, oftentimes people will need medication, so you would need to talk to your doctor. But ideally, you want to keep your overall cholesterol below 160. So let's talk about inflammation. Inflammation definitely contributes to cardiovascular disease, and inflammation can be hormonal. So especially for women, during reproductive years, we're kind of at an advantage because the ovarian hormone, specifically estradiol, helps regulate blood pressure. So women usually have lower blood pressure through childbearing years, before menopause. After menopause, the risks get even for men and women, so you don't have that hormonal protection. So you need to be a little bit more mindful about your nutrition and more mindful of your cholesterol levels. Lack of sleep also contributes to inflammation because hormonal levels rise and fall in response to lack of sleep. And excess weight can even lead to sleep apnea, which also contributes to blood pressure, which drives up the cardiovascular disease. And then stress is a huge contributor to inflammation. I think I've done a separate presentation on stress and inflammation. So if there are ways to reduce that stress, try to do that. So it could be mental stress, and there are different strategies to do that. You know, meditation certainly one of them. There's physical stress. Sometimes people over-exercise. That can cause inflammation as well. Overeating, that's digestive stress on your digestive system. So reducing inflammation helps reduce cardiovascular disease, and inflammation is a big source of that. Smoking is something, or not smoking, I'm very passionate about. I lost my dad to excessive smoking. So I know that this is something that is very, very preventable, and something that takes obviously different behaviors to control, but smoking permanently destroys the heart and blood vessels. So if you talk about cardiovascular disease, that would be your top risk, smoking. So it causes the buildup of plaque in the arteries. And the plaque is comprised of cholesterol, some scar tissue, and calcium and fat, and some other materials in the arteries. And the arteries lead to the heart. So clogging those arteries means there's not enough blood going to the heart, and that is damaging. So quit, because every try counts, because I know it's hard sometimes for people to quit. So that is aside from nutrition, but smoking is a major contributor to heart disease, so I definitely have to mention it. So let's talk about what you can do to prevent or slow cardiovascular disease. So I've already mentioned it. Before you do anything else, quit smoking. That leads to high blood pressure, cholesterol, and it raises up your triglycerides as well. Water, I tell all my training clients, stay hydrated. Do you need some water? And people sometimes get offended. They say, do you need water? You keep talking about it. But water is something that we need for every process, chemical process in the body. 70 to 80% of your body is comprised of water. And it's a very underrated tool for improving digestion, improving your blood pressure. So drink more water. And that is your number one tool to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. And it helps improve blood circulation, and it helps, as I mentioned, with a lot of things. You might have seen this slide from a previous presentation, but I find this really scary, and sometimes you need to see something scary to realize that things need to change. So these on the screen are the 4 most common vegetables in I would specify in the US diet. So onions, great. Lettuce, and it's not the kind of lettuce that has a lot of nutrition in it. It's very low in nutrients. Canned tomatoes, which have typically a lot of salt, except for this example with no salt, but still canned is not the same as fresh at all. And then fries. So for fruit, it's apples and oranges, but not real fruit, but juice, which is not the same. And I want to mention that even anything we eat, forget about that SAD diet, the standard American diet, which is sadly aptly named SAD. We don't absorb all the calories and nutrients that we eat. So even if we do our best, remember that it's not all staying with you. Some of the calories go through our system undigested. It's typically 10%. And when you look at packaged foods, or you look at nutrition calories, it's not exact. So for example, if you look at nuts, almonds specifically, only 68% are absorbed by your body. So if you want to get more of that nutrition, you have to remember that margin of error. That's a pretty big margin. Walnuts, only 79% absorbed. And I'm giving an example of nuts because nuts are a great healthy fat. And pistachios are the ones that get the most absorption. So if you like pistachios, you get the most of them. And also it applies to fiber foods. If you look at things that are high in fiber, and fiber is a great tool at fighting saturated fat and improving your cholesterol. Vegetables and fruit that are high in fiber. So tomatoes, 17% calories absorbed more than you would think. Kale, 28, orange, 12, and black beans cooked, 15%. So you get a little bit more from these because they're high in water, and that water definitely helps the absorption. So the point of me showing you the 4 most common SAD fries and tomato sauce in the American diet is to highlight the fact that eating close to the source, more fresh, less processed food is really the key to optimal nutrition. So every time you eat something, I think it's good to ask yourself, how close is this food to the original source? Here's what I mean. If you talk about these fries, one of the most common foods in American diet, how far are the fries from the original? The original being a potato. So baked potato, these very little manipulation, just baked potato. That is your closest bullseye, right? A little further from that is a mashed potato. So you start adding ingredients. The furthest, you start cooking it more and adding oils. And so that is the furthest from the source. And you can do that with other fruits and vegetables. You can do the same thing with apples. Apple is your source. That's the best, closest to the source kind of food that is going to give you the most benefits, the most fiber, the most nutrients. Go a little further, applesauce, a little manipulation, a little less fiber, well, much less fiber. Go further, juice, and there's very little nutrition left there. So think about that. Eating close to the source is going to help you retain the fiber, is going to help you fight that cholesterol and keep your heart healthy. And plants are really amazing at having a lot of fiber and having a lot of nutrients at fighting inflammation. So eating the rainbow, and when I say quality, I mean closer to the source. Okay, these real peppers, not roast, not necessarily fried peppers or roasted peppers, but the closer you are to that original fruit or vegetable, the more benefits you get. And I really want to encourage you to add 1 serving of plants, and the more color, the better. We'll talk about it a little later about phytonutrients, but you're in luck because most fruits and vegetables are full of color. So add 1 serving of that colorful fruit or vegetable to each meal, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, late night snack, anything. Add that little fruit or vegetable to each meal, and you will start feeling the difference. And you can start at your level. If you don't love the vegetables, you can start with fruit. If you, haven't tried certain vegetables or fruit, it's a good chance to try them. You might like them, you might not. And there are different ways to prepare them because preparation certainly affects how you like them. I have a child that would not touch any fruit or vegetable until I made it as a smoothie. So you have to kind of work with the level you're at and stack. When I say stack to other common behaviors, making things a habit is always easier when you attach them to another habit. So for example, if I, let's say, if I get ready for bed, I will put my sneakers by the door. So I know that I'll have things ready or have my exercise clothes ready, making it easier. So each time, I brush my teeth, I know I got to put the sneakers. So that's an association. Same thing with food. Let's say every time I put a plate on the table, I bring a glass of water. So I know that it's an association. And over time, as you do stack these behaviors, it becomes a habit. One is attached to another. It's much easier to do when they're stacked together. And variety is really important when we talk about vegetables, because eating the same, tomatoes are great. Eating a tomato every day is not as beneficial as if you try a variety of them, because different fruits and vegetables have different vitamins and nutrients that can help you. And fiber is king. I've seen somebody around Northbrook with fiber on their plate driving, and I thought this person is really smart, because they know that fiber is incredibly important. Most people are behind on fiber consumption. We need 14 grams for every 1,000 calories. So an average diet, average daily is 2,000 to 3,000, varies from men to women, or 1,500 to 3,000. So it's 28 grams per day typically. So make sure you get enough of that. And fiber is really great at reducing cholesterol. It's great at regulating blood sugar, so you don't feel those spikes. And it also improves the bacteria in your gut, which means it reduces inflammation. So it gives them a little something to feed on. Chronic blood sugar can also put you at risk for diabetes. So that will in itself will also increase cardiovascular disease risk, so heart attacks and strokes. So maintaining blood sugar is a lot easier with fiber. So I really want to circle back to that and emphasize that. But vegetables are not the only source of fiber. Whole grains are an excellent source of fiber. And I really encourage you to use whole grains rather than processed where possible. The whole grains can lower the risk of clogged arteries because they help add that fiber, and they lower that risk by 30%. So they're super high in fiber. It varies by grain. But again, it goes back to staying close to the source. Instead of having something really processed, you go into whole grains. So it's closest to the source. Some examples: brown rice, anything sprouted is usually high in fiber. Oats, especially steel cut oats, which are closest to the source, less processed. Barley, buckwheat, millet, quinoa, whole wheat pastas. And I know now there's a lot of population that has celiac disease. It's a lot more common now. And part of it is just the inflammation sources are so plentiful. But you don't have to eat gluten-free unless you have that condition. But if you do, then you would have to eliminate some of those whole grains like wheat and barley and rye, but other grains are still very accessible. And I know that sometimes people wonder about, I've been asked that before, about any kind of toxins or arsenic, especially when it comes to rice. So my solution is, whenever I prepare these grains, I rinse them under cold water for just a minute. And I think that definitely helps. And I would definitely recommend that. Another well-known source of fiber is legumes. So if you can add a serving of legumes to one or more of your meals, you will definitely help yourself amp that fiber consumption. They're very high in fiber. And I want to emphasize that soluble fiber is the kind that lowers the blood cholesterol, because it forms this slow-moving gel that kind of, if you picture this, I don't want to call it an ambulance, but like a superhero slow-moving gel that's going to travel through your intestines and pick up all the gunk, all those saturated fat clogging, everything. That is soluble fiber. That is your superhero. So fiber improves gut health, as I mentioned, and it helps regulate hormones like insulin. So that will help you reduce the risk not only of heart disease, but also diabetes. Some examples: chickpeas, beans, obviously best known legume, peas, and lentils. And lentils are really amazing, not only for the amount of fiber, but also magnesium. Now let's talk about fats. So I mentioned that the reduction of saturated fats, but we do need the fats. We do need some amount. I don't want you to be afraid of eating fat. We need it for various processes in the body, specifically brain function. It's very healthy fats are very important. And the emphasis is on omega-3 and omega-6 rich foods. So the ratio is what's really important. So we kind of evolved from being 1-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 back, in the Stone Ages. And current diet is not just 1-to-1 or 3-to-1, it's 16-to-1. And what happens is that leads to inflammation. So the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 rich foods is very important, because that reduces heart disease, that helps regulate hormones. And what's special about omega-3s is they have DHA, which is so important in all the brain processes. So it helps your brain function having more omega-3s. So I would say it's safe to say that you're already consuming enough omega-6s, but omega-3s, amping that production will help you keep the ratio to omega-6 a little better and get more for your brain and for your heart. So here are some examples of omega-3s: fish, seaweed, spinach is great for that, flaxseed, chia seeds, a lot of types of fish, not just fresh fish, but sardines and mussels are great. And then walnuts are also another great source of omega-3s. The thing about walnuts is, I know we're talking about heart, but heart and brain are very connected. And a lot of the nutrients sometimes are shaped in the way shaped similar to the part of the body that they help. So if you look at walnuts, they're kind of shaped like the brain. So more walnuts will help your brain function better. And they say what's good for the brain is good for the heart. So let me go back for a second. So I want to emphasize that it's important to consume healthy fats, so foods that are rich in polyunsaturated fat or monounsaturated fats. So polyunsaturated are nuts and seeds and fish and oysters, and monounsaturated fats. Biggest example is avocado, and then some of the oils like olive oil. They help lower LDL, they'll help raise HDL. So they are unsaturated, and that's the emphasis. Unsaturated fats are much more important. So that's the kind of fat you want to be consuming, but not saturated and not trans fat. So a diet that is high in saturated or trans fat is linked to lots of inflammatory conditions like Alzheimer's disease and overall cognitive loss. There was a fairly recent study in Chicago for people over 65 that had a high-fat diet. So they've noticed in that study that high-fat diet equaled 19 years of mental aging in just 6 years. So you've aged basically 13 years faster than you would have without eating saturated fats. And if you remember in the beginning, we talked about saturated fats. Ideally, 10% of your diet. If you have high cholesterol, 5 to 6%. So what makes fats healthy? They're naturally occurring, like fish, like nuts, and they're minimally processed. If you look at sources of trans fats, chips, fries, donuts, crackers, those are all processed foods. They're also far from the source, whatever the original food was. They're very, very processed, a lot of things added, and that clogs your arteries. So I would minimize those sources as much as possible. And then I wanted to mention the calories in fat. I'm not always strict on calorie counting, but it is helpful to know that fat is the highest in calories of all nutrients. It's 9 calories per gram as opposed to 4 for protein or carbs. So if you eat more fat, you will get more calories, and more calories will lead to weight gain. And those extra calories are stored typically as body fat. So if you reduce that body fat, you reduce cholesterol, you reduce triglycerides. So that will be more beneficial for your heart health. But I always say that I have this expression, memories over macros. So it's good to be aware of some of the sources of high cholesterol or high fat, but it's also good to know not to be restrictive, because I think restriction leads to binging and it's never good. So things that are important, special occasions, somebody's birthday or special event or a holiday, don't worry so much about fat consumption or cholesterol. It's a memory, right? Memories over macros. But be mindful of that on a daily basis. One occasion, having more saturated fats or junk food that's high in saturated fat, that's okay once in a while, but not on a daily basis. Now let's talk about sugar. And again, sugar is something that's almost always vilified. But it's important to remember that it is, again, processed sugar, added sugar. So we need some of the sugar to make triglycerides. So if you reduce the sugar consumption, your triglycerides will be lower. So cholesterol numbers will come down as well. Less sugar also means less excess body fat. But we're talking about added sugar. And I saw a very, very recent study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And that study said that people who lowered their intake of refined grains and added sugars, and that included beverages, so sweet sodas and things like that, those people had reduced several markers of cardiovascular disease. They reduced blood pressure, they reduced their fasting blood sugar in 6 months. So even a short-term effort, and I consider 6 months a short-term effort, can make a huge difference. It's important to remember that they also increase their consumption of fruits, vegetables, and legumes. So that is something we talked about in the beginning, right? These are all helpful things to reducing cholesterol. Sodium. And reducing sodium, as you may already know, helps reduce blood pressure. American Heart Association recommends 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. And most people get a lot more. And ideally no more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium a day. The problem with those amounts is that there's a lot of salt added in processed foods that all of us consume. So you have to be very mindful, not only of the salt that you add, but also salt that is already in processed foods. So if you reduce the consumption of those processed foods, you're going to automatically reduce the amount of sodium and reduce your blood pressure. And excess sodium can increase blood pressure because it holds onto that excess fluid in the body, and that increases the burden to the heart. So too much sodium can increase the risk of cardiovascular disease and also kidney disease. How do you reduce? You reduce the amount of salt you add, and you reduce the consumption of processed foods and canned foods as well. So eat fresh whenever you can. You can also control the amount of sodium you get in the body. But it's not just one ingredient, right? So let's talk about sodium and potassium. We know that sodium kind of inhibits blood vessel expansion, relaxation, and increases the blood volume. So it makes you thirsty, you produce more blood volume. So you're retaining all that water. But if you add potassium to your diet, potassium helps counter those effects. So it's important to remember the ratio, potassium to sodium. Ideally, it's 4:1 or 3:1. So you want to get potassium from fresh fruit and veggies. Those are the best sources. Bananas are a very popular source, but also potatoes are high in potassium. Easy to remember, right? Potato, potassium. Spinach, peas, cucumbers, also high in water. zucchini, pumpkin, apricots, a lot of leafy greens like kale is high in potassium. When we talk about sodium, best sources, I've already mentioned cookies, crackers, chips, canned fast foods, right? So eat more potassium and less sodium, and your heart will be happy. Another important pair that is helpful in fighting cardiovascular disease is vitamin D and calcium. And the reason I'm talking about pairs is that certain nutrients kind of balance each other out and help our digestive system feel better. So examples of vitamin D and calcium: salmon and spinach. Great pairing, right? Great dinner. White beans and tuna. Another great pairing. Kale and eggs. Cereal that's fortified with calcium or vitamin D. Milk or yogurt. Well, again, they have both. So there's more and more evidence now that vitamin D helps protect you against cardiovascular disease. And calcium helps you absorb more of that vitamin D. And calcium also strengthens the bones, but it also works on blood pressure control. So combining vitamin D and calcium is a great, great magic combination. I also want to mention niacin, or also known as vitamin B3, and tryptophan. Niacin lowers LDL cholesterol, and not only that, but it also raises HDL. So B vitamins, I don't know if you've heard about B vitamins, but in general, they're incredibly helpful for managing not only hormones, but also helping with the cholesterol balance. So having more vitamin B3 is helpful. And tryptophan is an amino acid that helps you produce vitamin B3. And great sources of tryptophan, we always get it on Thanksgiving: turkey, but also dark meat chicken. Another great pairing, not necessarily related to the heart, but something that two ingredients that go well together in really complementing each other and giving you the biggest benefit are iron and vitamin C. So spinach and steak, for example. All right, I mentioned phytonutrients, and those are the little extras that all the fruits and vegetables have. So let's talk about them. I call it your secret weapon. And phytonutrients are these nutrients that go above and beyond in helping fight inflammation, helping boost your immunity, and a lot of other benefits. They're antioxidant, they're anti-inflammatory, they lower the risk of heart disease, and they're great at strengthening your immune system. You can find the phytonutrients in all the fruits and vegetables, and they are known for their colors. Typically, you want to have a cup of color each day. I would go even as far as to say you want a cup of color with each meal. And most people don't get enough of it. As you can see, 30% of people don't get enough greens. 20% don't get enough reds. 20% don't get enough yellows or oranges. Only 12% get enough purples and blues. And those colors are kind of a nature's calling card at the power behind that fruit or vegetable. So some examples: orange or red, carotenoids. And I apologize if I don't pronounce any of these correctly. So the oranges, carrots, tomatoes, oranges, pumpkins, and yams. You see that orange or deep red color, that's a sign that carotenoids are in there. Ellagic acid, strawberries, pomegranates, walnuts. I know walnuts are not red, but the deep brown is the beginning of the red. Resveratrol is typically found highest in grapes, so the purple colors, the darker chocolate, the darker strawberries. Flavonoids are also very important at boosting immunity. It's one of the best immune boosters, and they're found in onions and ginger, green tea, apples, and grapefruit. I've had a talk earlier about blue zones and eating well for longevity. And ginger is something that a lot of people in those blue zones, people that live past 100 years old and they're healthy, past 100, they eat a lot of ginger, and that's a flavonoid at work. Phytoestrogens help regulate your hormonal system, and great examples of that are broccoli, carrots, and oranges. And finally, glucosinolates, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. Those are not only high in fiber, but also high in those phytonutrients that help fight inflammation and protect you from heart disease. Now, let's not forget herbs. But we're staying on that same point that eating fresh is really the key to protecting your heart. So a lot of the herbs are anti-inflammatory, and they're high in vitamins. Some examples: rosemary is high in B6 and calcium and iron. So those, remember, help lower blood pressure and protect the heart that way. Turmeric improves memory, but it also high in curcumin, which is antioxidant. Ginger helps decrease inflammation and swelling, not only of specific joints, but also of your body overall. And there are other examples. So cloves, cinnamon, those are all excellent herbs to reduce inflammation and make you feel better. Now that we've talked about some nutrition, let's talk about a couple of little extras that help keep your heart healthy. I've mentioned sleep before and how important it is to fighting inflammation, including cardiovascular system. So sleep is super important for healthy heart because lack of sleep puts you at risk for cardiovascular disease. What happens is over time, if you don't get enough sleep, an hour here, an hour there, over time it leads to increased blood pressure because blood pressure gets lower when you sleep. All the systems in the body are kind of powered down when you sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, your blood pressure stays higher longer throughout the day, and you don't get enough of that drop to bring it down overall. So to get enough sleep, you want to make sure that you work on reducing stress. Ideal amounts of sleep are 7 to 9 hours. They're a little bit less as you get older, but important sleep disturbances also contribute to obesity and to diabetes, and not getting those hunger cues. So working on sleep is incredibly important to your heart health. Other ways to improve heart health, we do it at the Y every day. Exercise, keep all your muscles working, and heart is, as you know, another type of muscle. So that helps elasticity of the heart. That helps lower your resting heart rate and lower your blood pressure. So exercise is definitely important. And staying at a healthy weight. The reason you see this cute little stuffed bear is because I don't want you to get stuffed. So don't overeat, slow down when you eat so you can avoid being stuffed, and that can reduce insulin sensitivity. So you want to make sure that you don't turn into this cute little stuffed bear. You don't want to feel stuffed when you eat. And finally, I like to think of our body as a plant. Think like a plant. As you age, your needs are very similar to that of a plant. You need more water, you need more and better nutrients, you need sunlight for vitamin D, and a little bit goes a long way. So if you're looking for any kind of nutrition support or motivation, as a certified nutrition coach, I offer a variety of nutrition services. I can help you set your goals. I like to think long-term, and that doesn't mean years and years, but it's longer than a couple of weeks rather than quick fad diets. I focus on habit-based coaching. It's not a cookie cutter plan. I don't do the same thing with everybody. It's individual. And I like to provide a lot of support and motivation so you can reach your goals. And the price for that is similar as personal training. So I wanted to thank you for joining this presentation. I'm going to stop my share. And if you would like to ask a question, this is a great time to do it.
I'll let other people go first. Heather, Kathy, do either of you have questions?
Well, it's not a question exactly, but okay, just given my eating habits, how beneficial is it to take supplements if I absolutely refuse to eat some of these foods?
So it's definitely helpful to take supplements, especially for foods that are hard to get in high amounts, like curcumin, for example. Yes, we always say eat turmeric, but there's very little in that, so you would need to take a supplement. Something like vitamin C, you can certainly get from food. But more importantly is that you get more out of food than you would get out of supplement. So
No, I really like that.
supplement industry has gone really far at getting better, but you still will get more out of real food than you would out of supplements. So it's, if you're looking for a real benefit for your body, you would get more out of it. And if you don't like certain fruits or vegetables, I would say try different ways of cooking them. Not only that, but also try different ways of pairing them. Sometimes one food may not be attractive, but you pair it with something else and it will taste better to you.
But see, that's on the assumption that I cook. Not happening.
Get it cooked. Find a place that makes it well and tell them how you like it done. And that's,
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
So I have a quick question. It's not exactly nutrition, but you had talked about how once you've gone through menopause, your hormones change that affect your blood pressure. And I've been noticing a spike in my blood pressure lately. Is that something that I can, like if I work on my salt intake and my sleep and my water intake, I might be able to manage myself? Or is that something you think maybe you ought to go see your doctor if your blood pressure has gone up since you went into menopause?
I think you would have to look at the numbers. If it's a number that is concerning, I would certainly talk to the doctor no matter what. But just having less of that estradiol hormone is not gonna overnight change protection for your blood pressure. So it's not gonna drop quickly. It takes years and years and years. So I think the points you mentioned, like reducing sodium, maybe adding more potassium, even more importantly, I would say more potassium to the diet rather than just reducing sodium. And I know you eat a lot of fresh foods. Just staying with that, I think that would be helpful. And
Okay.
sleep is very underrated. And
Yeah.
I think once you realize that when you don't get enough sleep, you don't get enough hours of lower blood pressure, that's number one reason to sleep more.
Yeah, that was really helpful. I hadn't really thought about that. So thank you. That was hugely helpful learning that. Thank you.
I have a question for you. Are you taking your blood pressure at home, or is this just blood pressure when you're in a medical environment?
No, I started doing it at home because I've noticed I feel different. I'm not exercising as much as I used to. I used to walk to work every day. It's been cold lately. I've been working and sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting, sleeping less. And all of a sudden I'm like, I don't feel right. And I've been checking my blood pressure and it's gone up quite significantly for me. I used to get up in the morning and it would be, 96 over 54, and it's now 123 over 76 in the morning, not later in the day. Later in the day, it's gone up, 140 over 80. Which is not really, that for me, that's very high for me. And I can feel it in my body. I just don't feel right. So So no, it's not just at the doctor's office. It's when I'm at home. So I think like Anna said, it's probably not just menopause. It's these other things as well. And if it's starting to concern me, I probably ought to talk to my doctor about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What about melatonin?
With regard to sleep,
Yes.
yeah, I actually take it every night to help me go to sleep. Yeah. So it helps. It's just I don't give myself enough time to sleep, you know.
And I think sleep, it's nice to have a long stretch at night, but if you're able to nap, if you have the time to nap, even
There's an idea.
that helps add that little time of lower blood pressure. Or
Yeah.
even if you can't nap, just taking like 30 minutes and just closing your eyes and just being quiet and not turning everything off, being unreachable. Yeah.
Let's work on that. I like that idea. That's a great idea. Thank you. Thank you. And yes, I use the melatonin. I use it every night now. I take it about half hour before I go to bed. And my best sleep is usually when I go to bed. You know, I might get 2 or 3 in a row, but I don't know about you all, but again, post-menopause,
Yeah.
and having had a child sit on my bladder throughout most of my pregnancy, if I go 2 hours at night without having to get up, I'm like, woo, now it's 1 o'clock. I woke up at 11 and had to go, and now it's 1, or, you know, if I went to bed at 11, I'd get up at 1 and then 3 and then 5. So.
And I think potassium will definitely help that as well.
Really? Okay.
So dates and all potatoes,
Okay.
apricots, it's, lots of sources, but potassium is really an underrated tool of feeling less water retention and waking you up at night, having to get up more often.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Good. Any
So-
other questions?
We'll have this presentation recorded, right?
Yes, yes. It is recorded. It will be up as a podcast on the WISE website. And I want to let you know that Anna is speaking again in March, on March 10th, because the dates line up. So on March 10th at noon, she's talking about the power of eating green. So join us again then, and you'll get information about it, but I hope you'll be able to join us then as well. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. A small group, but I sure got a lot out of it. So thank you.
Always.
Thank you.
Okay, see you Friday, Anna.
Bye-bye.